chatting about. So we're going to be going over chapters 4 and 5 and somatic tracking and the process is what he calls it. So somatic tracking is one of the most important pieces of pain reprocessing therapy. I think he says it's the linchpin or something. It's a key piece. And basically with somatic tracking, the principle is mindfulness. So with mindfulness, it's paying attention on purpose to the present moment, non-judgmentally. And that's just a general definition of mindfulness from Jon Kabat-Zinn that he talks about in the book. But it applies to pain because when we respond to pain with fear, there's the pain-fear cycle, things get amplified. But when we respond with mindfulness, with awareness, curiosity, lightheartedness, the brain does not perceive that as fear and as a reaction and does not keep producing it. So it can become less and less and less depending on how we respond to it. And so even as we're doing somatic tracking and the pain maybe doesn't change, even just that practice of doing somatic tracking is rewiring the brain as we're doing it. Okay, so it deactivates the pain-fear cycle. Mindfulness increases the feeling of safety. So that's why, you might hear people say, like, look around the room and see three things that are red and three things that are circles, right? Being in the present moment, mindfulness increases our feeling of safety and deactivates the fear circuits. So if it deactivates fear, then we're going to have less pain, right? And it actually helps the brain interpret signals properly. So one thing we know with chronic pain is that normal signals, little signals, can be amplified or misinterpreted by the brain. And that's why pain has become chronic, normal signals being misinterpreted as dangerous. So we want to keep sending the message of safety to the brain. So, and this is an important part. If you want to continue to send powerful messages of safety to your brain, they're going to work best if you can believe it, right? So sometimes people are like telling themselves they're safe, but don't believe it at all. So that's not going to be as helpful, right? It's not going to be as helpful for the brain. So what does help is to keep gathering evidence, more of that evidence list, that evidence sheet, detective for the opposite. And then when you send yourself those messages of safety, they will be more powerful. Hey guys, hey Karen, hey Peter, some people on the chat. Feel free to just, keep chatting and bringing up, if there are any questions you have or any points. One thing I love about this book is it's so simple and there's a lot of repetition. So, basically we just keep reinforcing that pain is a danger signal, pain is a misinterpretation, and when we decrease the fear, we decrease the pain. All right, so somatic tracking, I've already talked about the parts, but not really pointed them out. Mindfulness is the first one, messages of safety, and those are going to be more powerful when you have more evidence. So keep looking for that evidence of the way that pain is behaving that's not typical. You could notice those things that like Alan says in the book when he was watching a basketball game. Oh, I guess we're not to that part yet. When people are busy noticing things in their world and living their life, and then they realize they don't have pain, those are things that you could put down as evidence, right? Like, for example, I usually get pain after sitting 5 minutes, but when I was talking to my friends at lunch, I was able to sit 30 minutes and I had no pain and I didn't even realize. Like, that's kind of collecting the evidence. Okay, guys. Whew. I don't know, that's tricky for some reason. Maybe I'll get rid of my gum. All right. The last part is the positive affect injunction. Sorry, no. Positive affect induction. So that is jokes. So this is good. I'm laughing here, right? This is where in the book, I love it, he talks about the going snorkeling and just looking at the fish and not trying to change anything. And he says, and I'm a talking sea turtle. I'm a sea turtle that's talking. And you kind of, gets your attention. And he has this picture of this cute squirrel. So any things that you can do to lighten the mood, to be a little silly or crack a joke, to feel good. Basically, what they've done with research, they've found that when people are watching something funny or listening to happy music, when they have more of a positive mood, then they have an increased ability to react and overcome fear. So when you have a lightened mood, when you're feeling better, you can overcome fear and pain more quickly. Okay. Okay, so, oh yeah, so they were able to overcome pain-related fear more quickly in a positive mood. Couldn't read my writing there for a second. Pain-related fear. Okay. Have you guys experienced that ever? Have you noticed that when you're in a more positive mood, that you have a little easier time with pain? And then I'm going to go to the chat. I love the idea. We have to believe we're safe. I like to visualize and imagine a time I was safe and feel from the memory of it. Yes, I love that, Renee. That's often something that is so helpful. But if you don't have many memories of that or any, I have worked with some clients, it's not uncommon that, you think of this like cabin in the woods by a lake and you think, oh no, someone could drown or, the canoe could sink or, right? Like, just that's okay if that's where you're starting from. I don't want you to feel bad. But this is a practice of tuning your mind on purpose to something else. And that's why this part that a lot of us resist is the avoidance behaviors that we'll talk about. And, a lot of us are like, we think we should be working all the time and fighting pain all the time. And if we really want to get to feeling safe in our body, we can't just do that through intensity and fighting and pushing and, fighting the pain. So, good point. Any things that you can do to recreate those memories. And if you're imagining someplace like laying on the beach, the more you can imagine the sights, the smell, the touch, the sound, imagining that, our brain doesn't really know what's real or not. So if we can vividly imagine something, we can actually change the state of our brain and our body through our imagination. In fact, there are studies where people have increased their muscle strength by their arms were casted, so they know they couldn't use their muscle, but they imagined using it and they still gained muscle strength. So that's why, we'll talk about graded exposure later too, but visualization, I mean, the Olympians have known this for like 40 years. People in competitive sports use visualization. There's a lot of power there. Okay, so Karen wonders, can you give me some examples of quick 1 or 2 minute somatic tracking styles? He mentions this in the book, but I didn't see any specific examples. Yes, and then I feel less pain when in a positive mood or having minor drama, like spill on the sofa. Oh yeah, coffee spill on the sofa. I guess it's a distraction. Yeah, I always think of that example. I think Joe Dispenza gives this in one of his books, that if you are in love, if you're really in that like new love stage, if someone cuts you off in traffic, you barely even notice. You don't even care. You're like, oh, haha, whatever. So the mood, the emotion is really the biggest piece, you guys. We want to think, what can I do? What are the steps I can do? But doing those from urgency and fear will not teach your nervous system you're safe. It won't retrain your nervous system. So doing that from a place of this is what we want to do with somatic tracking, have a like curiosity, fascination, lightheartedness. So Karen, if you're wondering about a 1 or 2 minute somatic tracking, or even, just for 5 seconds, it might just be tuning into what you feel with words instead of like if you were like, oh, my rotator cuff, or sometimes people say my nerve pain, and that has a whole bunch of thoughts and feelings and memories associated with it. But if we're like, it feels like kind of a pinch that comes and goes, and it's about the size of a golf ball, and it feels warm. So anything's like, describe with words the shape, the color, the texture. So I like to ask, he doesn't ask this, I think, but like, is it, made metal, wood, or a knotted rope? And usually, if you give yourself a second and you're not super distracted, you can start to almost visualize something. And maybe it's like a spaghetti noodle, or maybe it's a vice grip. So those, again, you're changing the neural pathways of the brain when you describe it differently, use different vocabulary, and when you imagine it differently. So it could just be like a 5-second thing that, as you want to also do it when you're feeling some sensation, not a ton of sensation, but we'll talk about that later. But when if you're walking maybe, and it's like a 3, and it isn't hurting too much, and you can just tune into, instead of the, oh, this is probably my hamstring and it's pulling on my, hip, and that's pulling the SI joint, like none of that, but just kind of thinking of what color it is and the movement of it. Does that make sense? I know it might seem easier if there was a set way to do it every time. And, a lot of people will ask me, like they do in the book, how long should I do it? How often should I do it? And again, it's really not about how much you're doing it or how long you can do it or how often exactly. I mean, that's part of it. But again, if you're doing it with a lot of intensity and getting really frustrated and feeling dysregulated the whole time with this, urgency, energy, versus, 5 or 10 seconds of really getting into neutrality, right? So I know it's kind of frustrating, but this is part of the process, is letting go of trying to fix everything, letting go of trying to, follow someone else's rules for how to do something exactly, hoping that that will get us out of pain, versus starting to really tune into what's going on in our own bodies. Okay, so good. I think we'll move on. Okay, so things that help somatic tracking. Oh, and by the way, I have on my podcast, I have a podcast, Unstoppable Body and Mind. And I do have a couple somatic tracking meditations. Sometimes it's easier to start with listening to someone else do it or doing it with someone else. So I have one that's like 10 or 12 minutes and one that's just 5 minutes if you want something quicker. Okay, so he says a couple of things that can help with somatic tracking, and we've kind of already been talking about the intensity. So he says there's like hawk mode, right? Hawk mode is like on guard, tight, rigid, scanning the environment for danger all the time. And then he talks about like Toto, like Toto from the Wizard of Oz. He's not scared of what's going on in the room. He's just like, oh, a curtain, oh, a person, oh, I'm gonna pull on it, it's fun. So that's the opposite type of attitude of that hawk mode. And you don't have to get all the way to like, ooh, this is fun, I love it. But even if you're just like imagining watching a sunset or watching the clouds in the sky. And he even talks about the first time that he did somatic tracking, and he was able to really just observe it, and his pain changed in a different way, and it changed again. And he was just like actually curious about it instead of having a story about it and judging it. And then he said he just watched it and watched it, and it went away completely. So he was like really surprised and happy and thought, okay, next time he got into pain, he went to somatic tracking and tried to do it, and it didn't go away the same. And so the goal again of somatic tracking, the more that we're focused on, I'm going to use somatic tracking to get out of pain, the less effective it will be. And it's not to say it won't work. I've definitely done it. Before this book came out, I would do somatic tracking when it was 9 out of 10 pain and I was able to calm. But the expectation, for me, I don't know, for whatever reason, it did work. And again, it's not like there's a cut and dry, if it's an 8, 9, or 10, because that's pretty objective and you can start to learn for yourself. It's going to be different person to person and even day to day. So my best advice is, when you're starting to decide if you're in pain, if you should do one of those adaptive behaviors or somatic tracking, tuning into yourself and asking yourself, if you can do that somatic tracking with less intensity, that's going to be more effective and less frustrating overall. Oh, yes. Thank you. Someone just put in the chat, Unstoppable Body and Mind. Yes, it's on Spotify and iTunes and Google and all the podcast places. Yes, thank you. Okay, so that outcome independence is that idea that when we do somatic tracking and the pain increases or it doesn't change or it doesn't go completely away just like we want it to, we don't make anything bad. Oops. We don't make it mean that we're doing it wrong. We don't make it mean that the pain is never going to go away or that it's all, it must be structural. Outcome independence. So the way he phrased it is so good here. When we are trying to get rid of pain, the brain perceives that as dangerous, right? Because we're like trying to change something, trying to fight the body in this way, the nervous system. So we want to think of this as like a long-term process and not using somatic tracking just in the short term. Although it can be very effective for that, when it isn't, we don't want to make it mean we're doing it wrong or anything bad. It's just, kind of more reflective of where our nervous system is at that moment, how high our fear is. And if our fear is high, again, it doesn't mean that we're doing it wrong or that we'll never succeed. It just means that's more of a chance to do distraction and those adaptive behaviors. Oh no, sorry, I'm calling them adaptive avoidance behaviors. I apologize. I think earlier I might have said adaptive instead of avoidance. So I don't really use that term. That's more of like a, psychologist term or like a therapist term. But the way I see it is getting into the rest and repair state more of the time, getting into the calm, ventral parasympathetic state. That shows your nervous system that you're safe. So if you could get really distracted watching a funny movie and really getting into it and not thinking about your current situation and judging yourself for taking the time to watch a movie, that would do more to show your nervous system you're safe than messages of safety as you're, working hard to fight the pain. You guys getting that difference? Jason says, I have similar experiences where somatic tracking is often effective, even with high pain levels. I find it soothing, right? Yeah, it's kind of like, I just think sometimes to myself, like, again, I like figured this out before the book came out. So I didn't have that preconception going in of like, this is going to be worse in a certain way if you do it. So, just happened that I think I had just enough belief and enough trust. And I was just at that place where I was like, thinking this would work for me, but maybe not urgent, desperate. But you guys you'll find it out for yourself. So this, if it's seeming confusing, it's kind of like someone explaining everything to do to ride a bike versus getting on a bike and just practicing it and getting the feeling for it and getting your balance and getting less wobbly. You'll get it. And yes, you can do the same with feelings like emotions like sadness, anger, etc. It's basically sitting with whatever is there, observing it, and as soon as pain and emotions are seen, they're able to go away. Okay, I love that you said that because again, before some of this stuff came out, I was into life coaching and getting certified in life coaching even. And that is how they taught us to process emotions, is to describe the color and the shape and the feeling of it and notice it and just be with it, right? So exactly like somatic tracking. And then the other thing I found interesting is Peter Levine's book, Healing Trauma. He does somatic experiencing, describes a very, very similar process for healing trauma. So yeah, it's basically this concept, and it's a universal concept of life, Buddhism, yoga, right? Like the yogic sciences. When you are not resisting, there's less suffering. Pain times resistance equals suffering. So if you have an emotion like anger that you don't want to be there, but you're resisting it, versus anger and you allow it, you'll have much less suffering. And so will all the people around you. Okay. So I was wondering how to tell with emotions when it's appropriate to use avoidance behaviors. Yeah, such a good question. Because again, there's no, like reference sheet that you can go to that's the same every day for everyone. So the general principle, though, is if, like, how I think of it, and this is not from the book, this is more like polyvagal nervous system stuff. But if you are in freeze, if you're shut down, your emotional capacity is very small. And so that's the worst time to try to process all your emotions. So that is a good time to do avoidance. Usually they say with pain, if it's an 8, 9, or 10, and you could even do that with like emotional pain. If my emotional pain is an 8, 9, or 10, but again, some days it might be a 7 or a 5, and you're like, I want to do the avoidance behavior instead. I am all for that. There's no hard and fast rule that it's better to process the emotion than to avoid it at times. Because if you are avoiding it, teaching your nervous system you're safe, it may, like the pain may get less and less and less. It may go away. Or if with the emotion it doesn't, then you'll get to a better place where you're more regulated that you can process it, right? So I just think of how dysregulated I am. If I'm totally shut down, that's not where I'm going to be processing a lot of my emotions. Just maybe some, basic things to get by. But that's when I turn to like listening to a podcast that totally distracts my mind, or, a book or a show, or going on a walk, or talking to someone not about that subject. Okay. So, does that help? I know sometimes these answers seem kind of vague, but again, yeah, okay, some hearts. Okay. But that is the art of this. That is the flow of this. If it was a step 1 through 5 process, we'd all be out of pain right now, because we're really good at following steps and doing exactly what we're supposed to. But that intensity is like what's keeping us in chronic pain. Okay. So the other thing that helps, hopefully, is that piano very loud? Someone's playing the piano in the next room. Anyway, maybe it's some nice background music. So the other thing that helps is changing the language that you're using. So you could, instead of saying pain, some people just say sensation, or some people even say things like banana. The banana is here right now, or something. But do what seems to work for you. If you're talking about bananas so much, you're still talking about pain. So starting to use words that feel less intense to you. So one example, again, is nerve pain, because a lot of times the burning, tingling, numb, people call nerve pain, but gosh, that makes it sound like something structural. It makes it sound like your nerve is damaged. So it's tingling maybe, or it's effervescent, or it's like a buzzing, or it's a prickle, like some of those words feel lighter. And if you're describing something like, my migraine, that's like this diagnosis that has all these different components. And so saying something like, my someone was saying something like, this is just when my brain gets really fast, this is my fast brain, or like any creative way that you could say it differently. Do you guys have any examples that you like? That would be really cool to see some of your successes with some of these words. Oh, and by the way, like, please stop calling it an injury. I mean, if you were in a car crash or something, but I've had people, wake up with pain, associate it to something they did the day before, and then call it an injury. And that is reinforcing to the brain that it's dangerous. And he says in the book, when the brain believes the body is damaged, it responds with pain. So our words, have you heard this? Our words are spells. That's why they call it spelling. So just choose your words so carefully. Your brain is always listening. So I like the word body sensation because it's more accurate. It's most accurate. Whatever it is, tingling, sharp, stabbing, tinnitus, dizziness, yeah, exactly. It's a body sensation. I love that, Marcia. Thank you. Or yeah, altered sensation. Yeah, Karen, that's so good. Or oh, yes, do you hear that piano? I'm so sorry. I'm at this in this public building, so I can't really. Hopefully you can still hear me though. Okay. I think they might have stopped. Oh, a benign body sensation. That's really good. Yeah, and let's see, I like to sometimes just like in Dr. Schubiner's book, Unlearn Your Pain, when you feel the sensation, he just has you say to yourself, this is mind body syndrome. Or I like to say something like, oh, this is just a, mistake my brain made, or not in a judgy way, right? But just like, oh, this is just like some wrong information, right? Just like when you're in a car and the car next to you moves and you're like, whoa, I thought I was actually moving. My body felt like that. That was just some wrong information. It was just a mistake my brain made. Oh, and Marcia, this is my brain wanting me to pay more attention to my, yeah, dot, dot, dot. So it could be like, and it's probably not, spoiler alert, it's not your shoulder. If it's your shoulder, it's probably not my brain wants me to pay attention to my rotator cuff. No, my brain wants me to pay attention to like how much weight I'm putting on myself, and the weight on my shoulders metaphorically maybe, or the usually it comes down to those survival states, perfectionism, people pleasing, trying to be perfect. Well, I just said that. Trying to do good at all of the things, wanting people to like you, constantly busy, never wanting to rest, never feeling safe. Like any of those kind of things will, cause more pain. There's the piano again, guys. Sorry. Okay. Yes, and a follow can be, what do I need right now? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Usually I think of it as, oh, here's another one I use is like, this is a nervous system issue, right? Like this is a nervous system problem, not a knee problem. So how can I be more calm? Or what am I thinking that's not true? How am I not believing in myself or invalidating myself? And Jason says, this is my brain misinterpreting. Yeah. Or distorting the signal. Yeah. I mean, that's the basic kind of language you hear over and over in this book. This is the brain misinterpreting safe information as dangerous. I really love how he described from, I think, chapter 1, so loud, that construction worker with the nail that went through his boot, and he had so much pain, but really the normal signals were just there's pressure between the toes that wasn't there before, but it wasn't there was no tissue injury, not even a scratch. So it was a normal signal of pressure, but it was misinterpreted as, this is an injury because of what he saw through the boot. Yeah. Okay. I think there's a little place where they talk about like messages of safety, and that might be a nice thing to go over. Why didn't I not mark it? So yeah, any of those messages of safety that you guys like to send to yourself too, if you want to put those in the chat, that'd be really great. It's always nice to hear what other people use. Oh, here's another one that someone told me is like, this is just how my leg feels sometimes. Way more neutral, right? This is just how my leg feels sometimes. Okay. Alrighty. So changing the language, super, super important. And that's where you can get creative, and honestly, talking about it less and less is better anyway. But for somatic tracking, trying not to use as many diagnostic words, or right, you're getting it. Okay, sorry, I was just looking. Okay, here it is. It's on page 91 if you're in your books. This is temporary. I'm going to be okay. So these are more like messages of safety, but same type of idea, with sending your body a phrase that resonates with you. It's safe, or I'm safe, my body's fine. My brain thinks I'm in danger, but it's a false alarm. And then trust the process. Trust the process. That's such a good one too. So that's what we're going to talk about next. But maybe before we do, should we do a little example of somatic tracking? Who wants to do one live? Is there anyone that wants to raise their hand and do some somatic tracking as the example, and then people can follow along? I can do a general one too that you can all just adapt to your own body, but it might be fun if there's someone that wants to be the volunteer to do it live. Karen. All right. Do you want to just unmute then, Karen? You can come on screen or not. It doesn't. Hi. All right. How are you guys doing with hearing me? Are you guys hearing me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah? Okay. The background music is a little higher than normal.
Yeah. Okay. Because there's this door right here. I might even just go outside real quick, because I want you guys to be able to hear and not have a lot of distractions that are annoying. Hopefully it's calm at least, and that I can hear you. So actually, I'll turn this up. Okay, let's try it. I might move. Someone is really practicing this morning. Okay. So, Karen, I want you to first just start with getting as comfortable as you can, sitting back into your seat and feeling the support of your seat. And again, everyone else can just, do this yourself, adapt the cues to your own body and your own sensations. I like to have you close your eyes. Oh, yay, Peter says you can hear. Okay. So again, this is not what you would do if you're doing the 5-second somatic tracking, but this is what we're going to do together as an example of how you can do it a little bit longer, but just for a couple minutes. So go ahead and just start noticing your breath, noticing where you feel your breath in your body. Maybe you're feeling it most behind your nose or your throat or your chest. And you can really do any kind of breathing that feels soothing, or any kind of way of attending to the body. I just chose the breath. And maybe you can even take a long sigh out if that feels good, to let the exhale become longer than the inhale. We know that the parasympathetic state is engaged more in the exhale. So a long exhale teaches your body that we're safe. We're just going to go in with the intention of observing, being curious, being fascinated, like you're watching clouds in the sky. So I want you first, Karen, to check in with your body, starting from head, going all the way down to your toes, checking in with the different parts that get your attention, and then noticing what they are, and then overall scanning through to notice what in this moment is getting your attention the very most. You might have a lot of different areas. So Karen, what is that area for you?
The most would be my right ankle and right toes.
Mm-hmm. And do the right ankle and toes feel the same type of sensation, or are they different?
They are the same right now.
Okay, so we'll consider it as one. We just want to identify one area at a time, but sometimes it does move. A lot of times it moves, so we will follow it if it does. But the ankle and toes, now is it all of the toes?
Yes, it's actually, as I'm paying closer attention, it's the whole foot from the ankle down.
Okay, that makes it easy. So then I can imagine that shape with you. It's like the whole foot, top, bottom, inside out. Yeah?
Yes.
all the way from the ankle to the toes. Okay. And what is the quality of that feeling? Like, tingling, tight, burning, aching, stabbing? How would you call it?
It's I guess like a tingling type feeling. It feels kind of like crushed glass.
Mm. Is there movement to it?
Actually, there is a little bit of like a pulsating texture.
Mm. Hmm. So it's like crushed glass and the throughout the whole foot, and it's a little bit pulsating
Yeah, there's
and
an
tingling.
interesting, almost breathing quality to it.
Oh, okay. Is it like the same speed as your breath?
No, but similar
Okay. Okay.
concept. I just had never noticed that before.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And it may be different next time you do it, but that is fun to just kind of notice it differently. Um, so as you notice that area, like that crushed glass, and there's like this pulsating, does it have a temperature?
No, just room temperature.
Room temperature. And does it, do you imagine any color to it?
Um, Not this time. No, there's no.
Okay. Okay. No problem. And, this is totally fine. There's like no right answers here. We don't have to, some people are like, well, I don't see colors. And I always tell them, well, you might. Sometimes I've had people say, I don't see colors. And then that day they do. So we're just open to whatever. The main thing, again, is not what you're doing and describing, it's the emotion, it's the neutrality, it's the curiosity, like, oh, this time is different. Oh, this time it's that. That's the attitude. So then we want to also notice, let's see, there's a little bit of pulsing movement. And would you say that pulsing is like regular or irregular?
Irregular.
Mm-hmm. Irregular. And let's see, you didn't say there was a temperature. We talked about the shape and not really a color. Okay, is there anything else you notice about it then, since we've been talking?
Um, is, hmm, there's kind of a light area,
Mm.
like visual light, like turning on
Hmm.
the light bulb.
Ah, where is that?
The ball of the foot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's like a
So I
light
guess
area.
kind of a little bit of a color, sort of. It's like a whitish light.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so as you just notice that area, you could try just breathing into it. And this, he doesn't talk about this part as much in somatic tracking. What we just did was just describing it, and that's somatic tracking, just being neutral. But then I think of like the next part is like some science experiments. And again, just notice with yourself how urgent you are with this. But it might feel good to imagine breath going all the way down to that area, into the foot, into the ankle, seeing if the breath flows through it or bounces off or gets into any of those areas or surfaces, and just noticing how that goes. And maybe the the breath that you breathe in has a light to it too, and you can imagine what color you want that area to be, and breathe in that color of light. So how does that go, Karen?
Um, I do a lot of breath work, but I'm not right now. I'm not able to get the breath all the way down.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And honestly, again, this is like, if you're listening to this and you're like, wait, this seems like more like trying to fix it. Again, I think of it as just like playing with it. But if you are getting that sense from your nervous system of like it resisting and getting stronger or whatever, that you can just go back to describing, back to breathing. You could even alternate between noticing your breath, which may feel more pleasant, and then noticing that sensation. That's another way to do it. But if you're, we could try, one other thing maybe is just, again, with this question, just notice the intent is not urgent, but we're just going to be curious about like, if what might need to happen for that area to change and feel more soothed.
Um, I just got an image of having a blanket around it.
Yeah. Okay. Cute. Nice. Yeah. And I love that, like, just being open to whatever comes up to your subconscious, to your brain. So could you imagine putting a blanket around it? What color of a blanket would you want to put on there?
Blue.
Blue. Okay.
Dark
And dark blue, like a fuzzy blanket. You could imagine like the texture of it and how cozy it is, and you wrapping it on there. How does that go?
Well, okay, I'm not wearing blue, but I'm wearing a kind of a green color that's close enough. It's in the same like dark category, and I just wrapped my foot in that dress.
Yeah,
It feels really good, which
it
I've never
feels
done before.
good.
It's funny.
I love it. And hey, look at the positive affect induction. And why can I not say that? Uh, Positive affect induction. Yeah. Why do I not use these words? Induction. So laughing, right? Just that's part of what can be fun about somatic tracking is just being like, okay, I have no idea why I'm imagining it as a, you know, red balloon, whatever. So wrapping it in the actual like cloth of just your dress changes the pain sensation. I love it.
It's good. It makes, I don't know, it feels more playful all of a sudden.
Playful. That is what we want. And as you tune back into that area, then do you see it any differently? Do you
Uh,
imagine it?
yeah.
How do you imagine it?
Well, I feel pretty emotional at the moment, but it feels like a little child that needs holding.
Yes, right. A scared little part. Yeah, something that feels unsafe. A place that feels unsafe. Yeah. And if you just approach it this way with holding it and soothing, and we're going to be okay. We got this. I've got you. I do a lot of inner child work combined with somatic tracking because I do feel like you could treat these parts as like this inner child that's wanting some needs met, usually to feel safe and loved. How's that feeling now, Karen?
Well, I can get my breath down in there now.
Ooh, neat. Yeah.
It gets kind of like it just goes into there. I can't get it to go through there, but that's okay. It's
Yeah.
like all the way down into my leg and into the
Uh-huh.
foot area.
Nice. So you can go ahead and blink your eyes open. Obviously, we could keep going and keep playing with it, and that's one of my favorite things to do, because when we're talking about collecting evidence, there's no better evidence in my mind than when you're just sitting here having a conversation, your body's doing a whole bunch of fireworks because of what we're talking about. That is proof that it's neuroplastic, right? If nothing structural is changing. And even if you're like, well, I am sitting, but you're usually sitting makes it worse, and then you sit longer and do somatic tracking and you feel better, like somatic tracking can be so helpful when there is the that positive result. You can use that on your evidence list as more evidence of it being neuroplastic. Okay, thank you so much, Karen. Hopefully you guys were able to apply that to your own place, your own situation. But as you can see, like having someone hold space for you and not feel rushed versus, there might be times you're just doing it as you're walking, that will look a lot different. But when you open up this space and really go into it, a lot of insight can come up, a lot of insight. That's where I think people have their best insights, is not from me coaching them or other people, telling them things, but from their own bodies. Yes. And Susan says, Karen, that was beautiful. You're very brave. Yes, thank you so much. I was not expecting a somatic tracking example like that. That was really, really beautiful. Okay, so the process, we want to go through that a little. If you guys have any other questions or comments though about somatic tracking or about, any of those other terms that I like half the time say wrong, just feel free. Okay, so the process. The first thing he talks about is facing your fears. So basically, there's a lot of talk in pain science about how you're supposed to, talk to your pain, face your fears, face yourself. There are people that are like, you basically like, yell at yourself, or you tell yourself, stop it, right? And this approach doesn't quite go that far. It's more neutral and compassionate, I think, than, there are nuances of like, there are some times that you might feel pain and still want to do the activity, but it's not always just good to just fight the pain, as we were talking about before. If you, there's this analogy I just heard that maybe would be good here. So if you wanted to learn French, you want to not just learn French, or wait, you want to not do it by just stopping speaking English. So when you're thinking of just fighting the pain and changing the symptoms, that's like stop speaking English. But we want to learn French, like learn this language of the calm nervous system, the like nothing to fear state. All right, so facing our fears, we may have corrective experiences or setbacks. So this is like that chutes and ladders game where sometimes you land on a chute and you, I guess that's the slide one, and that's when you have like an extinction burst or a flare. You're doing pretty well and then have a symptom again. That can feel like you're back at square one and you haven't made any progress, but probably you've only slid back a tiny bit, but it feels like you're back at square one. That's how our brain interprets it. That's more the setback. So what's important with setbacks is to realize that's normal. That's part of the process. That's how we learn. And then the corrective experiences, those are great. It's always nice to have those. I used to do this with my neck when I started dancing. I would like roll my neck sometimes and it would kink up, and I would just remind myself, oh, my neck likes to move in all these different ways. It's healthy for my neck to move. It, feels good to get this full range of motion. And my pain would just go away within, a minute or two, and I could just keep dancing. It was corrective. But when we have those setbacks, it doesn't mean you've done it wrong. It doesn't mean it's not working. This is the process. Trust the process. Okay, avoidance behaviors. When pain is high, use avoidance behaviors. Basically, they categorize it into if you have pain that's high, or if you just have some pain, or if you have no pain. Okay, so let's talk about when pain is high, avoidance behaviors. And it's not about just doing the behavior, it's also about not guilting yourself, right? Not making it a big deal that you're using an avoidance behavior, also seeing it as something you're doing to soothe. And I actually like to reinforce telling myself that what I'm doing is to soothe my nervous system, not to fix the pain because of something structural. So he uses examples like massaging your neck or putting heat on, or some people might take some pain medicine or some ibuprofen. So like for me, I sometimes take these peppermint pills when my stomach's upset, right? Because my stuff's more digestion and IBS. And so I can know that IBS is from stress and still take that peppermint pill, reinforcing to myself, I'm taking this to help soothe my nervous system. I think of some of these things as like training wheels, that it's totally fine to be on your bike and riding with training wheels, those little things that help support you. So he talks about like standing up or changing positions, taking a hot bath. So some of those things that in other, I don't know, some of you probably have read a lot of other pain books, and other people may advise it differently. So I really resonate with this though, because I think this is not a problem for us of we're not doing enough. I think for most of us, it's that we're not gentle enough with ourselves. We're not soothing ourselves enough. And we're trying to just force ourselves to work through and heal when we need to rest to heal. Okay. So when pain is high, what are some avoidance behaviors that you guys like? If you want to put them in the chat. Definitely, for me, there's like, I love listening to Abraham Hicks on YouTube, but any other like books or podcasts that really get my attention and really help me believe something different can be good. I also like funny movies just to get my mind completely off it. Napping is a really good one for me. A lot can be solved if I take a nap. Listening to music, singing, yes, yes. And you guys, if you're like, I used to be like this when I thought about like some self-care. I thought about like I'll learn a new instrument, and it was like very productive. Like, let me do this relaxing thing that is actually a job. Versus you want to find, like, I like the path of least resistance. Oh, Angela says it, a heat pack, TENS machine and a heating pad, Whirlpool's heating pad. Yes, again, and we're just reinforcing like the muscles are tight because of my nervous system. I'm doing this heating pad to calm my nervous system, to teach my body and brain it's safe, not because I've done too much, right, or any of those other things. Chamomile tea, yes. Um, so yeah, avoidance behaviors. I think that's one of the most overlooked parts of this work because of our, lots of our personality types. We don't like to just let ourselves relax and have fun and, not worry about things. So yeah, definitely. I like to even think of more ways in my life, not just for avoidance, but to be in that parasympathetic calm state more of the time, even when I'm not in high pain, so that I'm not getting into high pain as much either. And yes, the ritual of making tea is calming, plus chamomile has relaxing qualities. Yes. Looking at / being in nature. Yes. So you guys just be your own judge if you're starting to get into like too much of like, well, if I take all these micronutrients and this, da 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 da, like you could take a handful of pills and be like, okay, this is so that I'm, going to fight this pain and all this stuff. Or you could take, something like an avoidance behavior with that intent, like we're talking about, right? So just notice if you're getting into that find it, fix it mode and starting to go down the rabbit hole of all these other physical solutions. You probably already know from the pain that you've experienced some things that work for you. And again, just really sending yourself the message that you're doing it for calming and to take care of yourself and because you love yourself. When pain is low to mid, that's the best time to do somatic tracking. It's harder to do somatic tracking if there's no pain at all. So sometimes there's emotional pain we can work on, but if there's no pain at all, that's a little different. If it's manageable and you can play with it, and like with Karen, where we just got curious and playful and we were laughing, that's how somatic tracking is going to be most effective. And then and even looking at somatic tracking as a way to take care of yourself, not a way to get your pain go down, but a way to take care of yourself. And then he does talk about extinction bursts, just so that people are aware. This is so normal. Oh, by the way, when you have no pain, he's going to talk about that in chapters 7 and 8. So we don't have to worry about that yet. And the extinction burst, we just have a couple more minutes. But how many of you have had extinction bursts? Probably everyone, if you've been doing this work more than like a few days or a few weeks, right? This is normal. I love how he says, this is a sign that it's becoming extinct, right? It's very easy to get back into that hopelessness and despair and make it mean something and get really hard on ourselves and mean to ourselves when we have an extinction burst, either when it's an old flare returning or a totally new symptom. He does say most of the time it's an old symptom that comes back, but in some cases, you'll have a new area of the body that starts hurting or a new symptom that's not pain, it's like a tinnitus or something. So just being aware that that can happen and trusting the process when it does, because again, it's part of the process. You're not supposed to just get pain free and stay there, because your brain and nervous system are rewiring and relearning, right? You probably maybe even some people have had an experience where they go to like acupuncture or a chiropractor or have some treatment, and the pain does go away, but the nervous system is still in high alert. So it's going to recreate that unless we start from the root and, retrain the brain and nervous system to actually perceive the signals differently. And then extinction burst, Marcia, she said, could you define it again? So it's what Dr. Sarno called it the symptom imperative. He basically found that when your pain starts to decrease, say you start to feel better, your nervous system still may be on that high alert. This is not how they describe it, but basically what can happen when you start to feel better is you'll get a new symptom or your pain will return. And it's not because you did too much, and it's not because you weren't somatic tracking enough. It's because your nervous system it's like riding that bike. You're still wobbly and you're learning to adapt and you're learning those parameters. And when you get that pain again, it's so important to react neutrally to, we'll go through, actually, there's a process of extinction bursts he'll describe in some of the next chapters, but it is normal to freak out at first. So don't worry if you do freak out, but as quickly as you can, reminding yourself that like, this is normal. This is part of the process. This is just an extinction burst. This means it's become extinct. This is how, I know we're at time, but I'll just describe the experiment where they got the term from, and that will make sense, I think. And healing is not linear. But that research experiment that they did, they were giving rats food through a lever. The rat would push the lever and get food, but the lever broke. And so the rat eventually stopped pushing the lever, but they noticed what it did at first is they pushed it over and over and over really fast. So that's that idea of like, it's becoming extinct. That pattern is going to go away, but there may be a short time in that adaptation that you see an increase of that behavior, an increase of that response. That's all that is. Okay, so I have extinction bursts that are connected while traveling. Pain just comes on when I know I have to travel and handle suitcases. Yeah, and that would even be like predictive coding, I would say too, yeah? And okay, yeah. So you guys, really great. I think we made it through with minimal interruptions, and even did that great somatic tracking. Again, thank you, Karen, for volunteering for that. Thanks all of you that joined or that are watching back. And we will meet again next week, same time. And that will be chapters 6. Is it 6 and 7? 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8. We'll do chapters 7 and 8. All right, you guys, have a great rest of your weekend. Bye.